Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Nate Bauer with me. Sean Fitz is going to be joining us in a second. Nate, we're going to start with non-transfer portal news and questions.
Sure.
Is it like work from home season in State College? We've had a couple of times so far since the season has ended that we've had internet issues to start the show, which is nobody's fault. It's just fascinating that all of a sudden the season has ended and we're having, and all of this stuff is happening. So State College, I'm wondering if everyone's working from home at 10 a.m. Curious time. That's all.
Yeah. You know, I think I'm trying to do the responsible thing, right? I'm 10 minutes early. I restart my laptop and then I come back from that and, nothing works. And so I feel like I sound like a person who is not tech savvy. And I feel I am. I'm okay. I'm all right, but things just aren't working out these days.
Fun fact about Nate. Nate is your classic early adopter. So this is something that I imagine kind of hurts, right?
It's horrible. It's horrible. This is the most embarrassing thing that happens.
I wish I was like somebody who adopted technology early. I'm just like, oh, that's awesome. And then I wait until I can afford it.
I'm not that. Listen, I'm still a hot deal guy. All right.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. Let's not get carried away.
So let's start off talking something in your wheelhouse. We're waiting for Sean Fitz to join the show to talk about the transfer portal and to get into some of those juicy topics that you want to discuss. And of course, Penn State fans here on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., they want some portal info. So we'll be talking about that here on the show. Also, the bowl game, all the off the field moves. And I think that's where we're going to start, Nate, is James Franklin talked with the media Sunday night about the bowl game, but really it was about his new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki. Just wondering your thoughts about the opening salvo of conversation about what Andy Kotelnicki brings to the Nittany Lions, according to James Franklin, who hired him.
That's a great question because I'm not sure that he said that. Right? Like I'm not sure that Franklin actually answered anything in regards to what will be different. Certainly he touched on the collaborative aspect that I think is, look, of all of this, right? This whole process, right? Mm-hmm. It has been a reading between the lines of things that he didn't like about Mike Yurcich, right? Like I'm not sure how else to put it. That might be a little more blunt than I would prefer, but getting the input from others on the staff, certainly explosive play rate, I think, is part of the conversation here. Yeah. The ability to shape an offense based on the personnel that you have. I think that all of those kind of come into play, but when we cut through a lot of this, it's what happened against Michigan and Ohio State. How do you get the program from where it currently is, which is a conversation unto itself, right? What is this program right now? It's very good. It is a very good program, but it hasn't been able to crack over that hump. And, certainly the thought that a new fresh face, ideas, relationships, all of that stuff at offensive coordinator can help resolve some of those issues is where this is going. But remains to be seen, right? I mean, there's a long way between now and next year, next fall, when you finally kind of get to see that product on the field.
Fitz and I discussed this Thursday night, I think it was, when the breaking news came out. You can check out that video for some extended thoughts on the conversation. But Fitz, is there anything you want to add to this particular part of the conversation about Andy Kotelnicki and what has happened since with the onboarding process? Anything interesting that stood out to you?
Two things. Number one, I want to eliminate any reference to mad scientists this time around. I think we've done that the last couple of times. So if we could strike that one from the record and not use it, it would be great. But this guy brings a lot to the table in terms of like what to be excited about. And he's done it in a way that he has been able to match up his teams, which have not been the most talented, with some of the more talented teams in the country. I know he did it in the Big 12, but there's a lot to like there. From a personality fit, he's just getting on campus and everybody else is off campus. So there's really not much in terms of meshing so far. I know they're just getting in and getting accustomed to the area and things like that. So the onboarding process is ongoing, if you will, especially since James Franklin's one of those guys that's out on the road. It's really tough to see how he meshes so far. So if you're looking for that kind of insight, it's just not happening yet. So, but from a football perspective, from a guy that is going to call to the strengths of his team, which you're going to find, you're going to, every team is different. You're going to find a different way to lean into it, but he is going to try and scheme them into the best possible spot against the best possible teams. I think you don't have to go any constructively deeper than that. That is his goal. That is his mission. Whether he pulls it off, we're going to see. But from all the people that respect him in the football world, all the people that reached out to me in the last week about this is a dude. This is a guy that is a smart guy that knows his stuff. I'm excited to see what he can do, and we're going to have to sit back here and wait and see if he can get it done.
Of course, Fitz comes up with a very poignant and correct way to describe that. And then, of course, I'm going to have a feature later today at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com going deeper onto what Andy Kotelnicki likes to do. Some of the through lines. That what I try to do mostly, Fitz, is just through lines of what did he do at Buffalo that translated to Kansas? Can we pin down any things that he likes in his offense that kind of, despite making a new offense every year for the best players and all that stuff and all of those things, what are the things that he likes that are kind of common throughout all of his offenses? That's coming up later this week.
Yeah, check out BWI Film Room, the mad scientist Andy Kotelnicki from T. Frank later today.
Yes, I will be, and I'll have all of the cliches dropped in at some point. One thing that is not a cliche is, and this is going to sound like one, to be good at football, you've got to be good at football. So this is the offseason. It's the time to get better. It's the time to train, especially for high school teams. Yes, we're going to have some championship games coming up in just a little bit, but one of the things that you can do is football is a sport that brings in a bunch of different practices and disciplines into one cohesive thing. It's what I love so much about football. So if you want to train like the best, train with the best. And the best is MMAFx, and that is Bruce Lombard of Lombard MMA here in State College. He has expertise in hand fighting, which is directly translates to football. And he has a video program that can help you and your program get to the next level in the trenches and with linebackers and receivers. The only comprehensive hand fighting program video set for football players available, featuring Penn State All-Big Ten defensive lineman and former NFL player. You can see here Anthony Zettel going through all of these different hand fighting techniques and processes, progressions in the hand fighting techniques. It's all encapsulated in a video program, which you can get right now. And by the way, I'm going to start with this. If you want to get your team ready, your son ready for football, you can get the whole video program right now for 15% off. Use promo code 15BWI to get 15% off at lombardmma.com/shop. If you're checking out the show here, you can see MMAFx. You can see it all on the screen, but I just want for the podcast audience, 15BWI is the promo code at lombardmma.com/shop, so you can get the course to teach your team this winter during winter lifting how to actually use all that strength they're developing. Super important to translate your gains onto the football field. And this is somebody who's worked with everyone from the NFL, in the NFL to the New York Giants, Houston Texans, Alabama, Washington, who's in the college football playoff. I'm going to go ahead and make that direct link here for Bruce. And then, of course, Penn State, working with Penn State and the programs that have spun off of James Franklin's coaching tree. MMAFx.net or Bruce at MMAFx.net. Guys, transfer portal, big time of year. This is a time that you need to check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, but Fitz will dip right into the receiver conversation. Penn State needs to get better at receiver. They need to find a receiver in the portal. What are your thoughts so far on the players that they have offered publicly, and can you give us a rundown of those guys?
Yeah, just a couple so far. 2 offers out, 1 player into the portal. I don't know if you guys started the show by talking about the guys that went in. But Josh Kelly from Washington State, Jamori Macklin from Missouri, North Texas, Missouri. He started at Missouri, went to North Texas. We talked about him a little bit on the show, the last show that we did. But a couple of guys that have been productive at their stops. Josh Kelly went from Fresno State to Washington State, different styles of offense, but like just a productive guy in the last two stops. So I mean, I think it's going to be a situation where they continue to evaluate, they continue to sort of stack and see what's out there. T. Frank and I both took a look at what's out there at receiver. And I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of stars, former stars. There's a lot of former stars out there. A lot of fool's gold. I'll say that. Just looking at some of the guys that are out there, the guys that have maybe even put up good numbers, and you look at it and maybe those numbers are a little bit hollow. You see guys that have put up good numbers even in the Big Ten, but you go to Michigan, you go to Ohio State, that's the standard, and they disappear. So there's a lot to balance here for this staff in terms of what they're looking at. It's not as simple as, hey, everybody in the portal is better than what we have here on the roster at Penn State. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it. Just losing one in Christian Driver, a bit of a surprise. I think a quiet day yesterday. I'm sorry there was not enough bloodshed for some people that were not happy that only 2 scholarship players went into the portal on Monday. But I think it's one of those things where we're going to continue to see some movement in and out. It's the first day. It happens. Guys have their reasons for staying, whether it be finals, whether it be bowl trip, things like that. I do still think there is turnover to come, especially in that receiver room, and we're going to see it. But Penn State working to set up visits for this weekend. They've already got one set with Alan Herron, the offensive tackle from Shorter University in Georgia. But that's something, and this is what happens this time of year, is these things pop up last minute, and you get them to campus, and sometimes we get them before they get to campus, sometimes they don't. But this is one where you have to move quickly. It's not so much like I don't think they're behind. I don't think this is a situation where you look at it and say that they're struggling because they haven't gotten anybody so far, or struggling because they haven't set up any visits so far. I think that stuff will come. It's just a matter of a day by day marathon. That's where they're at right now.
Yeah. Just to follow up on what you talked about, I feel like last year, and this is something we talked about last week on the show, and just generally the vibe of the receivers in the portal last year were very different than what we've seen this year. You have Dorian. I loved Dorian Singer. I love watching his film. Obviously you had Caden Prather, who went to Maryland. You had Dante Thornton. You had, the guys that came to Penn State, Dante Cephas. These were names that people went, oh, okay. And you sat up and you took stock of those guys. There hasn't been that yet so far in the portal at the receiver position. So it's just an interesting thing how it's all setting up. We have this question here, and I apologize. I don't read that language, but somebody who is here on the show says, hi, T. Frank and Nate. What happens if a player enters the transfer portal but does not get a team? Does he stay at his current school? Either of you guys, Nate, do you want to take this one? How does that work if you don't find a team? Are you without a team at that point?
Yeah. Does Penn State want you back is the question, right? If look, a lot of these situations are mutual in nature, right? Where Penn State, and I think this is probably the way that it happens most places. Obviously, we're most familiar with Penn State, but if a kid the trajectory isn't happening, right? It's not in the direction that the staff wants. It's not what the kid wants. Kid wants to play and wants to continue to play college football. If it's handled the right way and everybody can kind of talk it out and get on the same page, there is help that can be provided by Penn State in that transfer portal journey, right? Like they have relationships with other staffs across the country that it can, you're going to say nice things. It's like a former employer, right? You get that letter of recommendation more or less to land somewhere else. In other situations, if it's sour and someone, doesn't necessarily handle it the right way, maybe not, right? Certainly there are going to be players, and I think that you've seen this. Fitz, off the top of my head, I can't exactly remember, but there have been guys that have entered for Penn State that have ended up coming back anyway.
Dave Townley last year was an example. Yeah, that's it. It's at the staff's discretion. Like it is a situation where once he goes in the portal, you can cancel that scholarship. Like you don't have to have them back. That is a choice they are making to enter the portal. Now they can come back, as we've seen, obviously. And, it depends on the relationship, as Nate said, but it is like, once you get in the portal, like if you're leaving on bad terms and you all of a sudden want to come back, they can say no. You can be SOL. I mean, that can be a situation where, like you are without a team and all of a sudden you're out of college football. And we've seen that a couple of times, with Penn State guys that just haven't popped up anywhere. And maybe takes them a year to get back in, maybe something like that. But yeah, that's a situation where you're like putting yourself out there. Now, if you're at the end of your career, say Shane Simmons was an example here. You're at the end of your career. You're not coming back. It's understood on both sides that you're not coming back. Then you're going to go in. He went to Marshall for a year. Like, this is a situation where you can find yourself, in, how do I say this? You can find yourself out of football, but also if you want to leave that door open for you, just go into the portal. We've seen a couple of guys that have done that. So I think that's the way to look at it. But you've got an opportunity to, I mean, if you're putting yourself out there, like, be prepared not to come back. That's where you're at, because there are few exceptions. There are exceptions, but there are few exceptions of guys that are able to make that complete circle.
And just to kind of put a point on this I saw this morning, but this was from Monday night. And this is a crazy stat from the On3 Transfer Portal Twitter account. 1,183 FBS football players have entered the transfer portal during this first window, according to Pete Nakos of On3. It's 10 p.m. Eastern on the first day. That is bananas. That is insane, the number of players going into the transfer portal. And this is why you need the transfer portal tracker over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, because the transfer portal tracker generally is going to tell you all the names that are in there. The names that matter are the ones that Fitz and Nate and Ryan and Greg are sourcing to let you know, hey, these are the ones that you need to be aware of. And to get all that information, subscribe right now. I've been telling you for weeks, all the deals we've been giving you, all the deals we've been telling you about, these ones, this is why it matters, because this information, as somebody who's been on the outside for a very long time and is now part of the team, this is where all the information is. This is the part of football that I had no idea existed. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Use the promo code PSU1 to get 2 months for $1 to try it out. And once you go in, I don't think you're getting back out, because we got all the information you're going to need. One thing I wanted to ask you, Nate, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, sorry. Regarding the receiver conversation, I feel like there's an elephant in the room that hasn't been addressed that has to play out to at least a certain extent before moves are going to happen, which is what is everyone doing? Right. Like, and I'm not talking about necessarily underclassmen leaving. I'm saying, what is Malik Mega doing? What is Keandre Lambert-Smith doing? What is Dante Cephas doing? Right. Even Trey Wallace, to a certain extent, there are guys who have been in the program and have an opportunity to come back that really, I just don't think it's been explored yet. I mean, certainly my expectation initially going into this year was for Keandre Lambert-Smith to leave Penn State to go on to pursue the NFL. But I don't know. Dante Cephas was the same situation, right? Yeah. Everyone was expecting Dante to be a one-year guy. And now I think that some of that is in play for those guys to, at minimum, consider coming back for another year at Penn State. And until those situations are fully resolved, it feels to me, and again, I'm kind of spitballing here, Fitz, you can throw this into the junkyard if you want, but it feels like it would take a little bit for some of this stuff to shake itself out. I mean, at least days, right?
I mean, I would think so. I would think it's more about bowl practice in terms of like the way that they ended the season with the receivers playing like they did. And it's a very small sample size, and it's not the offense that they're going to run next year. And there's so many things that you can like push back against this. But Omari Evans, like, was not a factor whatsoever during the season. And all of a sudden he comes back, and, he's a guy that they're running out for a decent amount of reps there. So what's he thinking going into December? Thinking, okay, these guys are the one guy's out the door. The one, maybe that was my problem. Maybe that was the guy that I had an issue with. I'm not saying that's, I'm just hypothetical here.
Right.
Yeah. Like, there's one guy out the door. Maybe that's what was keeping me from being the guy. Like, maybe that's what's keeping me from being the guy that was supposed to be the third receiver, supposed to be the deep threat and everything like that. And then at the end of the season, Jaywan and Ty come in and they're sending me deep. James is saying in his last season availability, hey, we want to use these receivers in a different way, and we're going to do that against Michigan State. And then they do it. Like, they go out and physically do it. So I can't imagine a guy like Omari right now, like, what's in his head, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I could finish what I started here. I obviously probably have an opportunity somewhere else closer to home. But it's just fascinating how that can play out all in this. Like, we talk day by, like, we talk about the portal. The portal's only open for 30 days, but that is grind of, it's like a coaching search. It's like, hey, there's no new information in the last 5 hours, so something must be like terribly wrong here. Like it's a day-to-day thing, and you got to like basically lace up and go every day. So I'm very curious to see how, you know, a situation like Amari goes, a situation like Anthony Ivy goes, some of those younger guys that they think have talent. Like that's the thing, they think that those guys, if they stick it out and they stay long enough, they can have an impact.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's college football these days.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just isn't that part of the nature of the devil you know versus the one that you don't, right? In terms of how you scout the portal, is there is so much of an unknown. Obviously, James Franklin has said it so many times about wanting to have prior relationships with the players that they pursue in the transfer portal. They don't want to come at somebody completely out of the dark. Like that's just not, that is not how they have operated in the past. But, you know, I think that there is a tendency at Penn State to, you know, I don't know if it's think that you can salvage something, try to find, because you have that relationship, right? There is something that brought that player to you in the first place. And even though it may not have worked out exactly as you anticipated on the front end, it's almost like you've made that investment. You've made such an investment into the development of a player that it's tough to necessarily feel as though, the way fans do, that you're in a stronger position bringing somebody else in from the outside than you are just simply getting the one guy that you do have already in the program to turn the corner for the light to come on, for any of those things to come to fruition.
A couple of things that I think are important in this conversation, and Fitz, you can again correct this if this is incorrect, but like NFL decisions, for the most part, have those been made already? So Keandre Lambert-Smith, his decision whether to stay or to go just hasn't been announced yet, is how it feels a lot of times. I mean, going back to Rasheed Walker wasn't coming back and didn't play in the bowl game, but we found out the week of the bowl game. So, you know, there's not just receiver position. Obviously, a lot of guys have NFL potential to go this particular draft, but like those numbers are known. And then the question becomes, to Nate's point, do you think you can get production from those guys to equal starting production? And if you're going into the portal, I think you've got to have a guy this year that isn't, you know, Dante Cephas, who had some injuries and some issues, was good and was a big part of the offense, but wasn't like the guy. There's a couple of guys we've talked about in the receiver scouting that were the guy for their offense. So I think tailoring the search is also part of the conversation too. We're not going to take just somebody who has talent. They have to actually have proven they produced at their prior institution.
And that's why Mitchell Tinsley was such a good ad. Like we sort of classically underrate him because he was the number 2 and the obvious number 2 there. I thought, but by the way, Parker Washington, how about anybody catch that last night? That was fantastic. 6 catches, touchdown. Very cool to see Parker Washington, a pro's pro. But no, you got to find those guys. Like if you're rebuilding here, like you obviously want to find a number 1. Guess what? So does everybody else. Like that is the situation. And those guys are going to be like with NIL, it's going to be very different. You asked about those NFL decisions. I don't think they're set in stone. I think there's a couple that are, you know, pretty well in terms of what I think we know what they're going to do. But at the same time, you have that opportunity to bring those guys back and compensate them for it. That muddies the water. Sorry, you don't cloudy the water. You muddy the water a little bit. So I think that there are still conversations to be had in terms of usage, in terms of like how not so much like promising these guys are going to catch a certain number of balls or run a certain amount or whatever. I mean, it's a situation where you feel that you can help yourself a bunch. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a conversation that's worth ongoing. Like it's not a situation that you have to know on, what is it, December 5th.
We're gonna get roasted if we don't have this conversation. It's the obvious, it's the sexy one. Julius Seizure is saying, biblical, prodigal's son returns home. Will Julian Fleming wear number 4? And David K says, nobody gonna talk about Julian Fleming? PSU's chances with Fleming, the chat wants to know in this particular conversation, Julian Fleming. So I'm not gonna ask you anything specific.
Who is this guy?
Nate, I don't know if you know this or not, but a long time ago there was a Penn State football prospect named Julian Fleming, and then a bunch of things happened, and now he's in the transfer portal. So glossing over all of that stuff, I just want to put that out there that Julian Fleming is obviously a hot name that everyone wants to discuss. I don't know the validity of it. Genuinely, I don't know the validity whether it is or not. So I'll throw it out to you guys in terms of what's the conversation around, how should you frame the conversation around Julian Fleming?
Yeah,
Fitz,
I mean, that's
you.
a guy that they're going to evaluate. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're going to go after him. They're not going to go after him. We'll talk more about it on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'll say that. There's a lot of question marks in the chat here, but and a lot of different spellings of Fleming, by the way. There's just one M. It has not gotten any better from when he was in high school. But this is a guy you got to determine is he good enough? And he came from it's a fascinating evaluation because he came from Ohio State, the best wide receiver room in the country, was the number 3 receiver there, put up modest numbers, dealt with some injuries. That jump from Southern Columbia, small school in Pennsylvania, to the Big Ten was bigger than I think most anticipated when he was rated as a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. I genuinely don't know. I don't think that's a situation that's, you have some conversations, you have some people that are fans of him, you have some people that are not fans of him. This is a guy that handled his process in a certain way, and that has been noted. And it's going to be fascinating to see how they evaluate him, because I just, from a talent standpoint, I don't know that he's better than what you're going after. Could be,
he's just bigger.
He is bigger. He's physical. There's a lot to like there. But I'm not ready to jump one way or the other on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And same thing, you could say that from any top program.
You don't know that.
A guy that came out of a top program that either didn't have the production you're hoping for, or that never saw the field. Like you don't want to stamp Georgia or Alabama or whatever on a player and then go, hey, that guy's obviously better. We don't know that. The evaluation, as Fitz pointed out, is very important because the evaluation is the evaluation. It's not based on stars or where you went to school, because there's reasons that guys are in the portal. Anything you want to touch on before we move on? Penn State staffing news. Want to just leave it in case I missed anything that there is to talk about with the portal, procedure of the portal, anything like that.
Not really with the portal. I think it's going to be more of a trickle. Like, you had that boom, like nationally, it was a big deal yesterday. Like, it was a very good start to the morning. Not a very good start to the morning, but like a very, like, you don't need coffee to wake up and realize that Kyle McCord's in the portal from Ohio State. It was fascinating, some stuff. Just didn't happen on this end. Again, it's not the end of Penn State's turnover. 3 players in yesterday, 2 scholarship guys. It's going to continue to be an ongoing thing, because Penn State's got to get, they got to find room, right? Like, we're not going to sit here and speculate who's going to leave, but they got to find the way to get this team better. And that's part of the college game now.
So join BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, as Fitz said. Some of the conversation about Julian Fleming, some of the questions in the chat. You can find those answers. You can find a larger conversation. Use code PSU1 for 2 months. You get 2 months for $1. Moving on to some of the things that happened off the field that I think are also impactful, and you guys are the experts at this stuff. Ola Adams left the Nittany Lions as an analyst. Nate, can you tell us just some facts here about what happened and include everybody in on the conversation?
Nope. Fitz.
Okay.
Fitz.
Go.
All right. I wanted to include you. I wanted to go every other. Maybe I ask a question. No, Fitz.
No, we're going to make him pronounce the next guy's name. Ola Adams. He was here for this season. I am a huge Ola Adams fan. Like, defensive coach. He was the defensive coordinator at Villanova. He went with the Broncos. He came to Penn State. This is a guy I always expected to be on the staff. And if there's an opening in the secondary at some point, Ola Adams is going to be mentioned. Like, he's going to Indiana. Going to Indiana, joining that staff there. All the best to him. I think he's a phenomenal football coach. He's going to be a good recruiter. I don't think you're going to see too much of him, like, on the recruiting trail in this area, but that's kind of something to be talked about later. I'm big Ola Adams fan. Now he goes there. Leaves an opening for another analyst to come in. Andy Koltanecki couldn't make it easy on us. Frank, you want to give this one a shot?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Bill Queeser.
All right.
Bill Queeser joining the staff from Kentucky. Beach wine guy. He's on top of stuff in here. I'll let him describe this. Andy Koltanecki's right-hand man. What does that bring? And Beach wine guy wants to know, guys.
Nate, anything?
I'll only say I'm going to use some context clues here and say that James Franklin very recently talked about Manny bringing his right-hand man from Miami.
Right? Yeah.
Right. And so that dynamic of it's just not it's just not the environment that it feels like was perceived to be 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? It is a major operation in college football for staffing size. And they are doing things, right? They're not just sitting around, It's there are things for these guys to be doing. And it's like a second mind to bounce ideas off of for these coordinator positions in particular. And so the fact that they were able to bring Bill Quezert with Andy Koldenecki, I think is probably a win. I would assume that's how it's perceived internally.
Beach wine guy here with Cuisinart.
Yes.
Close, but I don't know where the R's come there on the end.
Well, he's an offensive line guy, so like it's interesting. You've now got Phil Troutwine, you've got Frank Leonard, who is a presence in the offensive line, everything, and he's generally a presence everywhere he goes. But now you've got another head in there. T. Frank, I know you've broken down the run game in terms of what they like to do. He will come in and he will be a helpful guy for that. Rick Leister is the guy that Nate referenced, coming with Manny Diaz on the other side of the ball. So I think that situation was like, hey, if you're going to bring me, I want to bring my guy. I know it's really interesting because you're stepping into a staff cold. Like, this is not a situation where a head coach will bring in his guys and he will have 4 or 5 guys. I mean, everything that we've seen is the offensive staff is staying intact, and he's just going to bring his guys to help him around. And I think that's part of the process these days.
Yeah. And that is something that I think there is a change coming to the run game, specifically maybe some technique stuff, just observationally from what I've seen from their offense. And that's, again, something you're going to get later, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and in the magazine, which is coming out, I think, soon. I always say things with half information, so that's a great way to operate as somebody out here is supposed to be factually sound as a journalist. But I think
it's Friday, T. Frank.
Friday? Okay.
Yeah.
I just knew that I had to write an article, and it was due, and it was very, 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 very late, so I knew it was coming up soon. Anyway, something that you shouldn't delay is your future. Join the thousands of people that have joined myperfectfranchise.net in changing their life. And really just the people who have stepped out on their own, braving the next thing. If you're ready to leave the corporate rat race, you've developed skills of how to manage, but you feel like you're being wasted. Maybe you're looking for a side hustle. You're working your current job and you just want more. You want more income. You want more flexibility. Maybe you love a challenge. I'm a person who loves a challenge. We're in transfer portal window and I'm putting hardwood flooring in the guest bedroom. So I love doing a bunch of stuff at the same time. Maybe you have that bug in you as well. My Perfect Franchise. Andy Ludicky is a franchise consultant with extensive experience placing people like you with the perfect franchise to manage. Whether there's a downturn in the economy, whether there's a boom, whether there is certain sectors are hot or not, there's always something that is moving. And Andy has his pulse on what is good, what is hot right now in franchise management. He has personal experience managing franchises himself. He's his own product here is what he's telling you about, what he does, what he knows. More importantly, he's here to get you in the right situation with the right business so you can be successful. It's not good enough that you can just own a business. You need to be successful at it with your unique experience. Check him out, 404-973-9901 or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. That's 404-973-9901, or you can check him out on the Blue White Illustrated message board. He's a recruiting lifer fan. He loves recruiting talk. So you can check him out on the message board because he has a similar mindset to you. Last thing we have here, guys, is the bowl game. Penn State drew Ole Miss for the 2023 Peach Bowl, December 30th. Our guys are going to be there, and they're going to tell you all about what's going on game day. So check out our game day coverage. But Fitz, just your initial thoughts, Penn State, Ole Miss, what do you got?
It's a pretty decent matchup, actually. Ole Miss is a team that, I don't know, their season's kind of mirrored Penn State's in terms of like, hey, they're building. All of a sudden they run into a monster and they're not as good as we thought they were. So like, that's kind of where I'm at with Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin is going to provide a different sort of challenge than Penn State has seen. Will be interesting to see who's all playing for both sides and how that impacts it as it does with every bowl game. That's not a playoff here. But it's going to be interesting to see how they attack. I think Penn State matches up pretty decently well with them. Like I haven't dove too far into it, but I think that it's a pretty good matchup for Penn State. And they've coached bowl games pretty well. So whoever is in charge of the offense, if they could just carry over what they did against Michigan State to Ole Miss defense, I don't think is all that threatening. So we'll be interesting to see what kind of game. I think it's a great matchup. Like in terms of me speaking from that means Penn State's not playing Liberty, like in the no-win New Year's Six bowl. Like them getting Ole Miss, I think is a sort of a blessing there to be in the game that, this is a game that people are going to take semi-seriously, at least.
Yeah.
From a fan perspective, like I know that there's a lot of parallels there. So I think in terms of like what it could have been versus what it is, I like it.
Yeah, it will be Penn State's best win if you consider that currently their best win is Iowa, number 17 in the final college football playoff ranking that we just saw. This is a quality SEC team and a team that Penn State, if they beat, you can't say, well, like you just said, they played Liberty. It doesn't really matter. They didn't beat anybody. Now, you'll do that no matter what. There's certain people that said Utah wasn't any good last year in the Rose Bowl win. So, like, you can't please 100% of people at all times, but this is a good team. This is a good team that I think matches up, as Fitz said, pretty well. Nate, any initial thoughts you have on the game?
Yeah, I would echo the season mirroring sentiment in the sense that post Michigan, I kind of ran some numbers on teams in the top 10, teams in the top 15, just trying to get a vibe for who else is really like Penn State in having to play the schedule that Penn State plays, which is to say nobody, right? Outside of two of the arguably five best teams in the country. What did Ohio State end up? 7th, 6th? And so there are not a lot of comps to that in terms of that echelon of opponent that anybody has been forced to play outside of Ole Miss, believe it or not. And so Ole Miss ended up 2-2 against ranked opponents. They beat Tulane when Tulane was ranked 24th, and they beat LSU when LSU was still ranked in the top 20. LSU was 13th, but they played Alabama and lost pretty decidedly. And then they played Georgia and they lost pretty decidedly there.
Even more decidedly on that one.
Even more decidedly. And so there's this like, okay, here are two teams in that purgatory of just, hey, they are competitive. It's not their fault that the rest of the schedule isn't excellent, but in the games that they've had against kind of mid-tier, 20-ish in the rankings type teams, they've had success. It's just, it's been kind of a feast or famine for both of these teams, and it'll be interesting for both of them, right? I think both of these fan bases are going to be looking forward to an opportunity to beat a team that is pretty good.
Pretty good.
It's a signature win. I mean, it's for both sides. I mean, that LSU win can be looked at as good. It can be looked at as not much, but like it gives you a chance, right?
It's just kind of funny because I think that it will, for Penn State fans, depending on what happens, fall into the same line of thinking of Washington 2017, right? That game, Penn State doesn't count. That's it. It doesn't count that for Penn State or for James Franklin that they won that game because it was a 9th ranked Washington team, right? A program that has established itself as being very much a part of the conversation year in and year out. That has been a very successful program.
And one that had so many NFL players on it. You look at that defense, Vita Vea, Taylor Rapp, Greg Gaines. I think they had a linebacker who made the NFL for a little bit. And of course, the other players, the corners in the secondary, they had multiple NFL corners, who play in the NFL. So that was a good win. But, as you pointed out, it wasn't the playoff.
It's what you're going to make of it. If you're going to open yourself to have fun, you're going to have fun. If you're going to say it doesn't count, it's never going to count.
It's just interesting that Penn State has had. I mean, this is a bunch of New Year's Six games, right? And we can have that conversation about the playoff all we want, but the only blue blood that they have faced was Southern Cal in terms of perceptions in 2016, and they lost that game. So I feel like there's been this sentiment. I'm not saying that I share it. I don't at all, but I think that there's been this sentiment from the fan base of, oh, well, they've gotten to these games, but beat Memphis, right? Beat Utah, and those programs, for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, erroneously don't get the credit that they deserve after putting the types of seasons that they had to get into those spots in the first place.
If you want a little more information about Ole Miss and what they were in the regular season, because as Fitz pointed out, like, who knows who's going to be in the bowl game. I think they already had one of their receivers opt out. I checked that out on Twitter. That was something that I read, but I didn't follow up on. So, but anyway, the point is
always good to just shoot from the hip on that. Yeah.
Yeah, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the information I gathered about what happened in the regular season with both the offense and the defense. One of the other things I think is to Nate to point out kind of the bowl, the New Year's Six conversation. Penn State has gotten a lot of good draws from which bowl they go to as well. Bowls definitely want Penn State. This was the ideal matchup for the Peach Bowl that they wanted. Regional SEC team and a big fan base that travels well with Penn State. So just a general side note from me, but in terms of how this plays forward, any last thoughts as we get out of here about what's coming up next with this team? Nate, do you have anything to close us out here today?
Yeah, no, I just think that from a nuts and bolts perspective, they've been how would I put this, messing around, right? Like the last week or so has been some work in the weight room. I did a story last week. Chuck Losey was on the Penn State coaches show and talked about some of the. It's almost like you sneak in good work, I think is how he put it, right? In terms of you get this like 3-week window between the end of the regular season where, yes, you're trying to rest your starters, guys who are banged up, guys who get a ton of reps, that they're not going too hard. But for a lot of the rest of the program, it's this sneaky window, but that you can actually make some gains in putting weight back on guys that lose it during the regular season. So you get that window and they're trying to take advantage of it, maximize it between now and when they leave for the bowl. But with all the coaches out on the road, right, there just hasn't been, not knowing the opponent up until now, there really hasn't been an opportunity to dive into like actual bowl prep. I mean, it's just been
portal.
Sort of hope.
It's been the portal and recruiting.
Not real sexy stuff right now, but they're getting there. It'll come soon.
I don't know about that. I think people are in love with the portal. So that kind of information and the recruiting stuff and all the stuff that Fitz brings to the table here on the show, both on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Fitz, anything you want to get us out of here with? Any final thoughts on the show?
So I saw the opt-out thing. Dayton Wade, the second leading receiver for Ole Miss, said something like, "I'm out of here." But apparently it's been clarified since that he is going to play in the Peach Bowl and then go to the NFL. So it was on Sports Illustrated. So, I mean,
right.
It's not really a thing like that. That's not really a thing to believe anymore. Unfortunately,
the internet got me on that one. So I apologize.
No,
thank you for correcting that.
Like you read it. You definitely read it, but it's just Sports Illustrated wanted to get that one out there. So anyway, and I assume it was a real person that wrote it, but no, we go back to Dave Eckert, who used to work at Blue White, is now covering Ole Miss. So we're going to go to him for our Ole Miss information. But no, the portal is hot right now. Obviously, recruiting is, I don't want to say limping to the finish line, but because most of those guys are already in the class. But Penn State trying to tie up some loose ends in 2024. Signing day is in a couple of weeks, but you're not really going to hear too much on 2024 until then. So portal it is, and then we're going to see incoming, outgoing, bowl practice, all that stuff. Check it out. We're going to talk about Julian Fleming on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
And the transfer portal, all the great stuff you guys have, and basketball, Nate. We got basketball, all that stuff. I there's no time for it today, but I just want everyone to know basketball's happening. You should definitely check out Nate's articles and what he's talking about with the start to the season. The Hoops podcast came out last week. We'll be doing another one sometime soon. So that's how that works. Sometime soon it'll be coming out, so check out the Hoops podcast. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Nate Bauer, Sean Fitz. Excellent work as always. Tight show today. We're going to get out of here and make sure that you get out to your day and into the holiday season. You have a great time. So we will talk to you tomorrow, where we're going to be breaking down a little bit more of the Ole Miss offense and defense, and of course the new offensive coordinator on the show. Stay tuned for that. We'll talk to you then.